All right, Talksport they've been really busy over the last day interviewing Turkey Al Sheikh, Ben Shalom, Eddie Hearn. There's a lot to dissect about what's being said by the promoters, about upcoming fights, about Joshua versus Dubois, amongst other things. Eddie Hearn yesterday gave an interview where he talked about Conor Benn. Simon Jordan was the one who brought it up, and it was revealing in many ways because I think Eddie Hearn let slip. I don't necessarily think he intended to mention dates, and so I didn't necessarily give it an exact date, but he mentioned there's an announcement in October regarding Conor Benn. Now, what that is, we don't know. Certainly, he's showing that he's back in training, he's uploading pics and stuff like that, so it seems almost a guarantee that he's getting ready for a fight. Why October? Why not announce it sooner? Now, in that interview, this is the first time I think I'm aware that Eddie Hearn ever really admitted that Conor Benn didn't handle the situation well, which is an understatement to say the least. He brought up the Ryan Garcia situation where Garcia held his hands up and said, "My bad, I'll take my punishment." He gets a year ban, backdated to April. He'll be back next year, back next April. He's still very, very young, so it's no real skin off his nose. It's a year out of the ring, that's it. With Conor Benn, yes, he's had two comeback fights at very low level at 154 pounds in the States. He hasn't fought in the UK since April of 2022, or well over 2 years ago. Come October, it will have been 2 years since this whole Eubank Jr. debacle started. It does seem as though Conor Benn and maybe Eddie Hearn are willing to move away from the kind of fight in of itself, but there's that cloud still hanging over Conor Benn, and it's hanging over Conor Benn by his own doing. And Eddie Hearn acknowledged that Conor Benn didn't handle this situation properly. That Conor Benn came out swinging and blaming the British Boxing Board. And all Conor Benn did by coming out and just essentially throwing his toys out of the pram, behaving like an entitled little prat, that's how he behaved. All it did was rub people up the wrong way. Ryan Garcia, say whatever you want to say about him, a lot of people don't like him, but he was just like, originally he was claiming he was innocent, and then it was just, when it became apparent that, there's no beating this. All right, hold my hands up, take my man. With Conor Benn, I think a similar thing would have been the best course of action. Instead of going on Piers Morgan, instead of dragging the British Boxing Board of Control's name through the mud, because all it's done is meant that you've had to fight abroad in the US, lower down the cards. You've not been able to fight in the UK, which is primarily where you've been based and where you want to keep your career progression. We don't know how Conor Benn is going to look when he gets back down to 147, or at least steps in there with anyone anyway decent, because he's been fighting the likes of, I can't even remember that last guy's name he fought, but that fight was competitive at times, and he was as basic as anything. I mean, that guy was one of the slowest welterweights. I cannot remember his name that I've ever seen at welterweight. He was so slow, it was painful. So that's the level Conor Benn's been at. The career path that Eddie Hearn was forging for him, which I think was pretty good, in the sense of he was getting the right fights at the right time. Yes, Eddie Hearn was selling them as dangerous, Chris Algieri and Chris Van Heerden. We knew they weren't, but it was helping Conor Benn along the way. That's all been undone. And as I said, Conor Benn and his perception with the public now is not a good one. And Eddie Hearn, as I said, he admitted that Conor Benn made mistakes. The mistakes he made, as I said, was acting like, listen, right? You failed two tests. Whether you say, oh, I was innocent, this, that, and the other, it was contaminated, whatever. At the end of the day, you failed two tests, right? So then it's on you to prove your innocence. You say, well, I've been exonerated. By who? The WBC? When they said that actually what you say is not actually what we're going to say, you're exonerated for a different thing. Seriously, this is what was going on. Conor Benn saying this is the reason, WB saying, well, it's not the reason, this is the reason, and Conor Benn accepted it, and then still saying that the original reason was the reason. And then wondering why people don't accept that. Oh, Jesus, shock horror. All people wanted to see was due process. That was it. That's all people wanted to see. If he'd have cooperated, he could have been back fighting probably October 2023. Maybe even sooner than that. But no. And again, all he did was drag the British Boxing Board of Control's name through the mud, tried to make out that he was exonerated because it was outside their jurisdiction on like a technicality. That's not the same as proving you're innocent. Proving you're innocent on a technicality is not the same as proving, okay, that wasn't in my system. It's like failing a breathalyzer test. Oh, the alcohol it said there was alcohol in my system, but the police officer, he didn't follow due course. He didn't follow his process, so therefore I beat the case. Ha ha ha. Yeah, but the alcohol was still in your system. Explain why was it in your system. I don't know, but I beat the case because it was outside of their jurisdiction or this happened. It's like, mate, that's not the same as someone coming and saying, yeah, you didn't cheat. And that's all people wanted to know with Conor Benn. That's why, and again, with the way he behaving like an entitled you-know-what, it rubbed people up the wrong way. Conor Benn's someone who'd had the best of everything growing up, and they say when times get tough, you gotta man up. It's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows. And when things did get tough and people were clamping down on Conor Benn, what did we see? We saw a guy just throw his toys out of the pram. Woe is me, everyone's out to get me. You failed a test, man. You failed 2 tests. No one's out to get you. People want to know why you failed them. And you just tippy-toed around everything and just threw your toys out of the pram and said, oh, no, everyone's out to get me, blah, 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 blah. And no one bought that. That's what Eddie Hearn is alluding to. Him saying an announcement in October, well, I would imagine that maybe that everything is good and he can fight again in the UK. Who he would fight against, that's the big question, because he's talked about going down to 147 pounds again, fighting, I don't know what level. Who would they fight? Who would they put him in there with? I was on the Proper Boxing podcast last night. We recorded that. It was great fun. And we kind of theorised that maybe Eddie Hearn is looking to do Benn versus Ennis because he is ranked by the IBF. Now, I know a purse bid's been called by the IBF, which Eddie Hearn has actually lost against, I'm not even going to try and pronounce the guy's name who Boots Ennis has already beaten. But what's to say that step aside money doesn't come onto the table? And there you go. You could do that. Could Boots Ennis versus Benn do the O2? 110%. Could you get it on a Riyadh season show? Yes, but we do need, let's not forget, not everything needs to be on a Riyadh season show. We need big events that are just Matchroom, that are just Queensbury, that are just Boxer. We do need that because that's the life and the soul of British boxing. If everything is reserved for the big shows in Saudi, what do we have for our regular shows? Frank Warren, to his credit, those Magnificent 7 shows, brilliant. We're seeing a little bit more from Ben Shalom. We maybe are seeing a decent main event from Eddie Hearn in the form of, say, Taylor Catterall too, but we're not seeing anything really else on the undercard, and we're not really seeing any other big shows coming up, like the Johnny Fisher card. I'm sorry, but that's not anything decent. It's more like a glorified next gen show. May as well be a next gen show. So I think that kind of fight, Standard UK on the zone, perfect. Let's go. So Eddie Hearn, Conor Benn, an announcement in October. Let's wait and see what happens there. I'll leave it there. Hope you enjoyed it. Smash the like button if you could. Hit subscribe. Of course, as always, 20k, boom, if you haven't already. Peace.